Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to St. Paul's. It's good to have you here today. My name is Charlie, and I am the rector of St. Paul's. I've been here for about 5 years. I arrived just before COVID. While we are attending to a few details, would you all please just make certain your cell phones are off, or at least in their most silent position. If this is your first visit, welcome to St. Paul's. We're so glad you're here. And if the Lenten lunch series is a part of your Lenten tradition, as it is for so many people, welcome back. Since 1921, the St. Paul's Lenten lunch and speaker series has brought the Richmond community together. And the goals have always been the same: to enjoy delicious home-cooked food, to cultivate relationships, and to explore timely topics related to spirituality and our common life. Our theme this year is pastors, priests, problem solvers, and prophets, everyday leadership in extraordinary times. The hope is to hear from church leaders, local church leaders, on-the-ground church leaders, to discuss what it's like being a spiritual leader in our current context. How are pastors faring in a post-COVID environment? What's challenging? What's satisfying? What joys and hardships do our religious leaders experience? Just what is your pastor thinking? Hopefully, we'll gain some insights today. So let's find out as you help me welcome our first pastor, priest, problem solver, and prophet, the Reverend Jim Somerville. I do realize we're having some parking obstacles out there today, some unforeseen events that have put up a few challenges. So we apologize for that, and we'll try to make better plans for next week. Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
Yay.
Good to be here.
Testing 1, 2, are we good?
Testing. Yes.
Testing. Dashell in the back.
Thank you.
All right. Jim, this is not your first time at this series,
It's
is it?
not my first time here, but usually I have to preach. Today I only have to talk.
Okay.
I love this. We could stay all day.
Does it make you more or less nervous to
A
not
little more nervous, actually.
to not have a script?
I don't know what you're going to ask me, but
Okay.
I'll do my very best.
All right, nice. Well, we'll start with some easy ones.
Okay.
First, tell us just a little bit about you, where you're from, and maybe a bit about how did you know you were called to this vocation?
Right. Well, born in Alabama back in 1959, and then moved to Southwest Virginia, on into West Virginia. I went to prep school in New Hampshire on the Poor Preacher's Kid from West Virginia scholarship. Ended up in Kentucky and then North Carolina, Washington, D.C., finally made it to Richmond, Virginia. I tell people I wasn't born here, but I got here as quickly as I could.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So where in I'm from North Carolina.
Yes. Well, I was in Wingate, North Carolina for about 9 years.
All right. Is that western?
Wingate, they say. It's near Charlotte.
Near Charlotte. Okay.
Yeah.
I was on the East Coast, closer to Greenville, Rocky Mount, Raleigh area. What about your vocation? When did you first know that this was a part of your or God's future for you?
I grew up Presbyterian. I fell in love with a pretty Baptist girl. The rest is history.
Okay.
But my mother-in-law is here today, and it was her husband, Bill Treadwell, who helped me fall in love with the Baptist church. I attended his church while I was in college. And at one point he said to me, do you have a little free time? Could you help out with our youth ministry? And I was available. I did that. I fell in love with ministry. I remember thinking in those days, if I were independently wealthy, I could do this full time. I didn't realize that ministers get paid for their work. I just thought it was volunteer.
Yeah.
So
Do you think I still encounter people out there who say, you get paid
I know,
for that?
really. You work 20 minutes a week and you get paid for that.
You get paid for all of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we just see you. So that's what I'm about today. And that's the purpose of this whole series, was to kind of get into the background of what really happens. Because I think it's fascinating. I started a mentorship program with seminarians during their last summer of seminary, so that they would really get an experience of what day-to-day life is like in a congregation, because it's impossible to understand. Somebody compared being a pastor or a priest to being an airline director. You know, the person in the booth that controls when the planes, it's just constant. And the stresses of it, it's not that we work that much harder, but it's the changing gears constantly, from being in the hospital with people to having to balance spreadsheets and raise money and preach and all of those things.
Which is what I love about this work.
Mm-hmm.
It's something different every day. I don't know when I get up in the morning what I'm going to be dealing with throughout the day. And usually by the end of the day, I sit down and think, I could not have guessed that this would happen or this other thing. What used to terrify me as a young man was the idea that I would end up working on an assembly line somewhere,
Right.
screwing the little plastic caps on top of bottles. I couldn't do that. And ministry has so much variety in it, so much diversity. I love a good challenge, and every day can be that kind of challenge.
Right, yeah. So tell me a little bit about your current position and what
Yes.
attracted you to Richmond and to First Baptist.
So I am the senior pastor at Richmond's First Baptist Church on the corner of historic Monument Avenue and beautiful Arthur Ashe Boulevard. I've been there since 2008, and before that I was at First Baptist Church, Washington, D.C., which sounds more impressive than it is. But I was there for 8 years, or as I say, 2 terms, and then got the call to come to Richmond. And when the church first called and said, would you be interested in talking to our search committee, I looked over the vital statistics of First Baptist Church that were sent to me, and I hemmed and hawed. I prayed about it, but I finally wrote back and said, my work here is not finished yet. I appreciate the offer. I really do. And I thought that was the end of it. 5 months later, I got a call from the chair of the search committee who said, how about now?
Oh, 5 months.
And he caught me on a good day. It was the perfect day to call and say, how about considering a move to another place? So I did. I came and talked with the search committee here. And my expectations about Richmond, about First Baptist Church, were just blown out of the water. I thought I would find like 12 old white men in dark suits and skinny ties sitting there grilling the new prospective pastor. Instead, it was about 50 people, a very diverse search committee.
Yeah.
I got to talk with the staff. They were wonderful. And then, of course, the city itself. Do you know Richmond is the most wonderful place in this part of the world? You know this. I was so glad to come from Washington and find that in Richmond, you can find a parking place.
Except today.
Except today. Yeah, in fact, my wife said when we were coming in, she said, today feels kind of like Washington, D.C. on a regular day, doesn't it?
Yeah. You never know down here. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's not.
People joked with me when I was coming to Richmond. They said, oh, you're going 2 hours and 200 years south, right?
Yeah.
And when I came to Richmond, what everybody was excited about was this restaurant in town where they have the salad bar in an old bathtub. And I was coming from Washington, which is known for its food scene.
Yeah.
I want to say in the nearly 16 years that I've been here, the city of Richmond has just really risen to the occasion. I'd like to take credit for that. I'm not sure that I can, but how many great restaurants in this city now that weren't there 15 years ago? I do my Chamber of Commerce speech. I say, look, you've got this beautiful river running through the middle of the city that has Class 4 whitewater rapids. Where else do you have that? You have more public art on the walls of the city per capita than any city in America. Richmond is the 3rd most tattooed city in America. Did you know that? It's a wonderful place to live and work. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. So a Baptist and an Episcopalian are sitting in front of 100 people.
Yeah.
What do we need to know about the Baptist Church? And what is it? Did you ever think about being an Episcopalian?
Never thought about being Episcopalian.
Okay. Why
But,
not?
call me on a bad day and I may consider it.
No, what do we need to know about your church, the ethos?
Okay, you need to know this about being Baptist. First of all, we have a congregational form of government. We don't have a bishop, we don't have a pope. The people get to decide, which means we have this wonderful local church autonomy. The national headquarters of Richmond's First Baptist Church is in that building on the corner of Monument and Arthur Ashe Boulevard.
Yeah.
So nobody can tell us what to do, which can be good, can be bad. There have been some times when my wife and I have both wished we had a bishop who would step in and make things better. But that's the way we do business, and that's one of the things I love.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to have a backstop.
We have what we call Bible freedom. Every Baptist is free to read her Bible with understanding. We have church freedom, and then we are really big on religious freedom. Mm-hmm. We think nobody should stand that there should be a wall of separation between church and state. Yeah. Or as James Dunn used to say, he was the chair of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, he would say, "Ain't nobody but Jesus gonna tell me what to do." And that is a perfect expression of the Baptist spirit, right? Gotcha. Especially when it comes to government and religion. We want those two to stay far away from each other.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about kind of the meat of the theme. What has changed most, do you think, in that first call that you had and what you imagined and what you thought church was going to be and what you imagined your role? What's been a couple, maybe the biggest shift or a couple of shifts that's happened? What have you seen? What movement has affected the way you currently are a leader in the church today?
Thank you for asking. So I wrote a book about this called When the Sand Castle Crumbles. Why is my church dying and what can I do about it? You can find it on Amazon. And it's a little book. You can read it in about an hour, but it really does describe what I learned when I was at the church in Washington. I remember seeing pictures of that sanctuary filled to overflowing with people and hearing about their previous pastor, Dr. Ed Pruden, who had been there in the 50s. And then I realized that the person at my previous church that everybody talked about had been there during the 50s. And then the one at the church before had been there in the 50s. It took me a while to put the pieces together. I came to Richmond and they talked about a pastor who had been here in the 50s. So I realized that there was this church-going boom that coincided almost perfectly with the baby boom. It was after World War II, people coming back home, babies being born, church nurseries being filled to overflowing, sanctuaries being filled to overflowing. Mm-hmm. And then what happened in the 60s, some of you remember the 60s, the late 60s, a lot of social unrest. Some people left church nurseries and never came back again. Young people went off to war. A whole lot of things changed in the world. There was a response in the 80s called the Church Growth Movement, which was basically panicked church leaders wondering, how can we get people to come back to church? That's when contemporary worship services got started and mega churches got started. But here, in the first part of the 21st century, we find ourselves looking at a very different religious landscape. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the 15 years that I've been at First Baptist Church, church membership in America has dropped by an average of 1 percentage point every year. And the number of people who identify as atheist or agnostic or nothing in particular has risen by about 1 percentage point every year. Which makes it hard for me to say to a young person considering ministry, yes, you should go into the ministry. It's wide open. There's lots to do. And it doesn't feel like a very hopeful time.
It's a question mark,
Which is
right?
part of the reason that I wrote this book. I have hope for the church in America, and I have hope for the church of the future. But it can be discouraging day to day. Sometimes when you look out over the congregation on Sunday morning and there are half as many people as there used to be, especially after COVID, you have to think, all right, how do we make the best of this? How do we move forward? How can we be hopeful about the future?
Yeah. And the congregation also brings those expectations to you, and they want to know what you are going to do about it.
Exactly.
Write a book.
When I quote some of these statistics to church leaders, they say, yes, but First Baptist is an exception. And I'm sure church leaders are saying that everywhere in America. Our church should be an exception. Everybody else is, but we should be different. So what I like to think about is not how many people show up for worship at our church on a Sunday morning, but really, how many times does church happen between one Sunday and the next? How do you measure in a different way? I know that there are people who watch our services on our live webcast on Sunday morning. I know there are people who watch the services on television. During COVID, that number went way up because everybody was at home and we were still on TV.
Yeah.
So I bump into people in the city who say, oh, during COVID, watched you on TV.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, that's been an opportunity to have some influence, and we need to be grateful for that. For the internet, for webcast, for Zoom, for Facebook Live. I caught Charlie's show on Facebook Live the other day, his evening prayer, and learned more about Candlemas than I have ever known before. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Riveting.
But I think we really need to assess our impact and not just our numbers. Like, can we reach people by blogging, by tweeting, or whatever they call it now, by webcast and Zoom conferences. And
in the Episcopal Church, we have these things called parochial reports, and they're due in March, and it's all about how many people are in these seats out there on a Sunday morning. Basically, we're very Sunday centric, but like you say, I think what the church is in the process of doing is expanding that and breaking that open. I think about it in terms of touches. How many touches have we had on people?
Right.
Not only on a Sunday morning, but throughout the week, through the different ministries that we have and the services that we offer, and the people who are fed, the people who learn, the people who are shaped. And I think that's hard for congregations because they think that church is all about Sunday morning when you work, an hour and get paid for that.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
So you may know our mission at First Baptist is bringing the kingdom of heaven to Richmond, Virginia, the KOH2RVA, which is on my license plate. But when people ask me, how do you do that? How do you bring heaven to earth? I usually say there must be 1,000 ways to do that. Just look around for anything that doesn't look like heaven, roll up your sleeves, and get to work.
Yeah.
And so people in our congregation are doing this in a lot of really creative ways. But what it means is that church is happening throughout the week and not only on Sunday morning. When someone helps out in our shower ministry for homeless people, that's a way of bringing heaven to earth. Or when they teach 3-year-olds in Sunday school, that's a way of bringing heaven to earth. When they take the mobile market over to St. Luke's Village to help people get the cleaning supplies they need for the week, that's a way of bringing heaven to earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. So what would you like to share with us about what is it that does get you discouraged? What does kind of get you down?
So thank you for reminding me of what gets me down. My senior associate, Lynn Turner, walked into my office this morning and she said, I need you to know about this family with young children that has decided to leave the church. And I'll just say this, I take it personally every time somebody leaves the church.
Yep.
I feel like I've let them down in one way or another.
Yeah.
It usually seems to be about politics or religion. Like people discern sometimes, even though I don't preach politics from the pulpit, they will discern that maybe his politics aren't exactly the same as my politics, and maybe I need to find another church.
Yeah.
Or it's about religion. Maybe his theology is not exactly lining up with the theology I learned when I was in Sunday school. So I need to find another church.
Yeah.
What I say to myself and to other people is that when somebody moves from one church to another, the kingdom doesn't lose a single citizen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I say that to comfort myself because I need comforting in those
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
It's discouraging. I think you and I both know we want to be all things to all people. We want everybody to be happy when they come to church and when they leave.
Yeah.
It's not always true.
Yes.
Yeah.
It definitely, whenever we have these things called letters of transfer in the Episcopal Church, because old school, again, parochial reports, who's in, who's out. Anyway, don't get me started on that. But whenever one of those shows up on my, it's either a letter of transfer in or a letter of transfer out.
Which ones make you happy?
In most cases, the ones that are coming in.
Yeah.
But you're right. You know, when those transfers out come in, the first thing I ask is, what did I do? Mm-hmm. What did I do wrong? And then, of course, you know, we do have, there's a lot of politics around us in this context. And I do believe in the intersection of those things and how we should be speaking into places of justice and injustice. And people do take that the wrong way.
I said this during COVID, and especially during 2020, which was, as you know, a perfect storm, right? It was an election year with a deeply divided electorate. We were experiencing a global pandemic, and there were protests for racial justice going on in the city. And here we are trying to be pastors to people in a time like that. Very, very difficult. I remember thinking to preach on Sunday morning is like stepping onto a tightrope and walking for 20 minutes hoping that I will not fall off on one side or the other. Yeah. Because people were listening. You know, are you coming down on my side of the political divide or that other side? And I've looked through the sermon. There's no political language in there, but people are listening for buzzwords and catchphrases, and maybe you're on the other side after all.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yes. And now that we're recorded, they can rewind and say, you did say that.
No, thank God they can rewind and find out, the thing I thought you said is not the thing you actually said.
Yeah, well.
I had a great conversation with somebody who said, you were running down the John Birch Society in your sermon. And I said, I don't think I've ever, there was one time I told a story that was verbatim from somebody else who mentioned the John Birch Society. So I said, can I send you the manuscript and then you let me know? Sure enough, when I sent it to him, he read through it and said, oh, okay, I apologize. But sometimes it helps just to do some fact-checking and realize that what I was getting so stirred up about was not worth getting stirred up about.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that most clergy have is that desire to be all things to all people. And then our churches try to do that too. And of course, that's not possible. Neither is it possible for you. My therapist often says that clergy are like stray dogs at a whistling convention. Going here, going there, you, yes, you. And that's the way it feels sometimes. All right, so what fills your cup? My cup runneth over. What do those days look like?
So, honestly, I do love the work of preparing to preach on Sunday. And it's a luxury for preachers to have the time to really dig into Scripture and read the commentaries and talk with people and think big thoughts. And then what an incredible gift it is to stand in the pulpit on Sunday morning and have people sit and listen to you while you talk. That's a heavy responsibility as well, but what an honor to have people listen. So I sometimes complain about it, but the work of preparing to preach really does fill my cup. That's where I get fed. And then I love people. This year my motto is leading with love, right? that simple. But I find that if I go out into the sanctuary 30 minutes before worship starts and just start greeting the people who have gotten there early, by the time I have to go to my spot and get ready to lead worship, I am just full of excitement about the morning because everybody who has come wants to be there. Let's have church.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Sunday mornings are my highlight too. They're fun, they're chaotic, they're crazy, they're nuts, but it's definitely the joy heartbeat of the week. And yeah, being able to preach is just such it is a gift. And to be able to help people think through things. How do they think about their faith? How can they think about Jesus? How can they think about God? How can they think about these stories? How do we put them out there in the world vis-a-vis what is happening in the world? It's quite a challenge. How long do your sermons last?
My sermons?
Yeah.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Is that
twice as much work as you have to do?
It is a lot harder to write a 10-minute sermon, I would contest. We should have a preach-off. No, yeah, 10 to 20 is usually what I say for people who step into that pulpit. But another mentor says preaching takes as long as it takes.
As long as it takes.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of what fills my cup, let me say, since she's here, my wife, Christy, has been my partner for 41 years, and she does fill my cup again and again. Being with my family is dear to me.
Yeah.
I also like sailing and backpacking and just exploring the city and learning things about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, I love people, but Christy is the one I love most. And I think you know this. To have a partner who can hear you on the rough days and give you some helpful feedback and help you get back out there again, that's essential.
Sure is. And I think my next, you've just given me an idea for next year, which is going to be clergy spouses.
There you go.
Clergy partners.
There's some
the stories they hear and the things they have to endure.
We let Christy get into the pulpit a few weeks ago, and I was afraid. Right? Like, she's been storing it up for about 37 years. Who knows what she might unleash on the congregation? It was all good. She said,
sometimes I want my husband to do just that. All right, well, we're going to wind down. Anything else you'd like to tell this group of people about leadership right now, or about your role, what you're thinking?
Well, I will just say it's a really crazy time to try to be a church leader. I don't know that there was a time when it was easy, but at that church in Washington, Ed Pruden used to say, "How did I grow such a large church?" Well, in those days, it was a matter of opening the door and stepping out of the way. That is no longer true, is it? So church really has to be intentional, and it requires everybody's involvement. All of you sitting on the pews, you are the church, and if the church is going to succeed these days, it's because all of us are working together to carry that gospel message, which is not just a message of salvation, but a message of kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. We've got to carry that to the world. We've got to be willing to do the work that it takes to make a difference. And it's hard work, and it's thankless work. And sometimes you lie down at the end of a day and say, I didn't make any difference. And then get up and do it again the next day. So I need all of you, Charlie needs all of you, the city needs all of you to be faithful to the work that Jesus has given us to do.
Can we get an amen?
We had our big Disciple Now weekend this last weekend. Our youth participate in a full weekend of activities and learning, and one of them stood at the pulpit on Sunday morning and said, I think I know how Jesus' disciples felt now. Sleep deprived and in need of a shower.
Right on.
But I think, sometimes that's exactly what it means to be a follower of Jesus these days.
Absolutely.
To do the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm going to now talk a little bit about lunch. As you know, and I hope you've seen, the advertising is out and about. Please help us spread the word about Lenten lunches and the speakers. It's on Facebook. Hopefully your leaders are helping also to do that. Next week, we have the Reverend Marlene Forrest, who's at St. Philip's, and she sits back. Gwen is pointing at her head right now. So, Marlene, we really look forward to hearing you next week. And please make sure to order your lunches a week in advance. For those of you who have ordered, lunch is awaiting, and if there are extras, good for you. But we do really, this is mostly to control food waste and to help our folks know how much to prepare. So please make sure you're ordering in advance. And I just want to point to the stations of St. Paul's, 14 stations of St. Paul's that help us tell our story about how our involvement in the system of enslavement and how we are trying to use our narrative to change the narrative out in the world today. Those will be up throughout the season of Lent. There are 14 individual works of art created by Janelle Washington, paper cut. And they will be up, and there's a little booklet over here that will help you pray those stations, modeled after the Stations of the Cross. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Jim, would you send us forth with a blessing?
Can I make one announcement
Yeah.
before I do? While we're making announcements, on March the 4th, it's a Monday evening at 7 o'clock at First Baptist Church in Fellowship Hall, we're going to have a panel discussion about 2 little books that we are challenging the city to read during Black History Month. So it's The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, about 100 pages, and then Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, about 100 pages.
Great.
You could read both of them between now and March the 4th, or you could just come and listen to the discussion on these 2 very important books.
And I think St. Paul's is connected to that project as well. So let's stand for a blessing.
Let me just give you the blessing I give at First Baptist Church. It's not original with me, but it's a classic. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Have a great week, everybody.